Imagine for a second knowing a secret so big it could take down a massively corrupt official. But there's a catch. Revealing it could literally destroy your own life. So, would you speak up? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're kicking things off with a ton of energy because we're doing a deep dive into this incredibly fascinating study out of Thailand on the psychology of whistleblowing. We're going to completely unpack the myth of the greedy whistleblower and look at what the actual data says about how rewards function when, honestly, absolutely everything is on the line.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the whistleblower's dilemma, move into the reward controversy, explore expectancy theory, uncover the altruism twist, look at multiplying the impact, and finally, finish up with designing better systems.
All right, Chapter 1, The Whistleblower's Dilemma. Before we even touch the idea of rewards, we really have to acknowledge the immense real-world cost of exposing grand corruption. And by grand corruption, we're talking large-scale misconduct, embezzlement, just massive sums of money. I want you to ask yourself directly, would you risk your entire career to expose it? It's a heavy question, right? You see, whistleblowers are almost always organizational insiders. That makes them the absolute best at exposing fraud, but it also makes them the single most vulnerable people to the fallout.
When we break down the terrible math of whistleblowing, the scales are just massively unbalanced. On one side, you have these incredibly severe costs. We're talking retaliation from your bosses, total social isolation, defamation, protracted court battles, ruinous legal fees, and basically career death. And on the flip side, the personal benefits are often just intrinsic satisfaction, that warm feeling of resolving a problem. It's a completely unfair trade, and that sets up exactly why robust reward systems are so desperately needed, which actually brings us right to our next point.
Chapter 2, The Reward Controversy.
To fix that awful imbalance we just talked about, organizations like Thailand's National Anti-Corruption Commission proposed financial bounties, and not small ones either. They were looking at up to 10% of the damages recovered, sometimes capping at a staggering 100 million baht. But introducing this kind of money, it creates massive pushback. And it's all rooted in something called motivation crowding theory. This quote right from the literature perfectly summarizes the fear. If whistleblowers get remunerated for their reporting, this may change the public judgment of their actions, turning them from heroes to greedy snitches. It's this widely held assumption that paying people for doing noble, pro-social deeds will actually ruin their moral drive and completely taint their image.
Chapter 3, Expectancy Theory.
Okay, let's dive into this. Is the assumption that money ruins morals actually true? Let's use expectancy theory to find out. This is a psychological framework that basically says individuals make voluntary choices based on what they believe will lead to the most desirable outcome. To translate that academic jargon simply for us, it's the belief that taking a risk, taking a massive risk and putting in the effort will actually result in a meaningful reward, whether that's cold hard cash or public recognition.
Now, to test this, the researchers didn't just ask a handful of people in a room. They went big. They surveyed 2,710 employees across 38 different government agencies in Thailand. That sheer massive scale builds some unquestionable credibility for the data, right before we drop the big twist.
And just to highlight how incredibly robust these findings are, check out this response rate, 90.3%. In behavioral research, getting over 90% is basically unheard of. It absolutely proves that the findings we're about to look at truly represent the actual workforce's mindset on corruption and rewards.
Chapter 4, The Altruism Twist.
Get ready, because here is the paradigm shift about how highly altruistic people actually view financial and non-financial rewards. First, we need to quickly define our key variable here, public service motivation, or PSM. It's a very specific form of altruism. People with high PSM are deeply driven to do good for society, even when it costs them personally. Now, the old assumption was always that these highly moral folks would be completely turned off by cash rewards.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact theoretical model they tested. You can map out how public service motivation, the perceived seriousness of the wrongdoing, and whistleblower protection all interact with reward expectancy to influence that ultimate intention to actually blow the whistle. It adds some serious academic rigor to our narrative today. All right, here is the twist. If you look at the data representing individuals with high public service motivation, when reward expectancy goes up, their intention to blow the whistle goes up too? No way, right? High PSM individuals actually want the rewards. They don't view them as some greedy bribe. Because they are so highly committed to public service, they view these rewards as absolutely crucial validation and endorsement for their immense personal sacrifice. The rewards crowd in their motivation, they do not crowd it out.
Chapter 5. Multiplying the Impact.
So that altruism twist is a massive breakthrough, but public service motivation isn't the only multiplier in this whole whistleblowing equation. The study also found that the perceived seriousness of the wrongdoing really matters, and that's driven by the goal gradient effect. Basically, this is the concept that people place a much higher value on outcomes they believe are difficult to achieve. Think about it. Exposing grand corruption by top officials is incredibly difficult. It's dangerous. And because the goal is so incredibly hard, the eventual reward feels even more meaningful to the whistleblower. It instills this much deeper sense of accomplishment.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the interaction between rewards and protection. This is the highly satisfying data climax. When you combine rock-solid protection against retaliation with high reward expectancy, whistleblowing intentions absolutely maximize. Because look, if people don't feel safe, offering them a big pile of money just feels hypocritical. It feels like a trap. But when robust protection and meaningful rewards work in synergy, trust skyrockets.
Chapter 6. Designing Better Systems.
Okay, it's time to transition from the academic charts into real-world actionable steps. Here's your practical manual for fixing the system. Organizations shouldn't just haphazardly offer bounties. They need a dual approach. Implement both monetary and non-monetary rewards like public recognition if they want it. Ensure strict, unbreakable anonymity. Provide actual legal counsel and financial support during those inevitably protracted court cases. And honestly, most importantly, establish absolute zero-tolerance safeguards against retaliation. You literally cannot just pay whistleblowers. You must fiercely protect them.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought as you evaluate your own environment. Is your organization's culture truly ready to reward and protect its heroes? Or is it just asking them to sacrifice absolutely everything for free? The data is crystal clear. Courage should never have to be a financial and career suicide mission. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep asking the tough questions.